There comes a moment in every person's life when they stand at the crossroads between who they've been and who they're meant to become. And if you're someone who runs from connection, from commitment, from the very things your soul craves most, that moment is right now. What if I told you that the very thing you're protecting yourself from is the only thing that can set you free? That every wall you've built to keep pain out has also locked love out. That the moment you decide someone is never coming back, you've actually made the decision about yourself. You see, avoidance isn't really about other people. It never was. It's about the relationship you have with your own heart, your own capacity to remain present when life gets uncomfortable, your own willingness to stay open when everything in you screams to close down. Right now, someone listening to these words is in the middle of running. Maybe you've already sent the text that burns the bridge. Maybe you've already made the decision that it's easier to be alone than to risk being hurt again. Maybe you've convinced yourself that walking away is the brave thing to do, when really, it's the only thing you know how to do. But what you don't realize is this: avoidance isn't a character flaw, it's not who you are, it's simply a pattern you learn when staying felt more dangerous than leaving. Somewhere along the way, your nervous system decided that connection equals threat, that vulnerability equals danger, that love equals inevitable loss. The child in you learned to survive by becoming unreachable. When the people who were supposed to love you couldn't stay present with your needs, you learned to stop having needs. When the people who were supposed to protect you became the source of your pain, you learned to protect yourself by never letting anyone get close enough to hurt you again. This wasn't a conscious choice. This was survival. Your soul, in its infinite wisdom, created a strategy to keep you alive. But what saves us as children can destroy us as adults. The very mechanism that protected your heart when you were powerless can imprison your heart when you have the power to choose differently. And here's what nobody tells you about avoidance: it doesn't feel like avoidance from the inside. It feels like wisdom. It feels like self-protection. It feels like you're being smart, logical, reasonable. You can justify every step backwards, every door you close, every bridge you burn. You can make it sound so reasonable that even you believe it. But your body knows the truth. Your body knows the difference between healthy boundaries and fearful walls. Your body knows when you're moving toward life and when you're moving toward death. And every time you choose distance over presence, isolation over connection, your body registers it as a small death, a little dying, a piece of your aliveness that gets locked away. The tragedy isn't that you learn to protect yourself. The tragedy is that you're still protecting yourself from people who aren't trying to hurt you. You're still fighting battles that ended years ago. You're still running from love as if it's the enemy, when love is the only thing that can heal the very wounds that make you run. I want to tell you about someone I knew. Let's call him David. David was brilliant, successful, charming when he wanted to be. He had everything going for him except one thing: he couldn't stay. Not with jobs, not with friends, not with lovers, not even with his own dream. The moment things got real, the moment someone ought to matter, the moment he felt himself caring too much, he would find a reason to leave. For years, David told himself he was protecting his freedom. He was avoiding drama. He was being realistic about human nature. He had learned, he said, that everyone leaves eventually. So why not leave first? Why not maintain control? Why not spare himself the inevitable disappointment? David's relationships followed the same pattern every time. He would meet someone amazing. There would be chemistry, connection, possibility. For a while he would let himself believe that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this person would be worth the risk. Maybe this time he could let someone in without losing himself. but then it would happen. They would want more time together. They would expect him to show up consistently. They would need him to be present during difficult conversations. They would want to talk about the future, make plans, build something together. And that's when David's alarm system would go off. He would start noticing their flaws. He would start feeling suffocated. He would start remembering all the reasons why relationships don't work. He would start creating distance, picking fights, making it impossible for them to stay close. And then when they finally got frustrated and pulled away, he would use their reaction as proof that he was right all along. See, everyone leaves. Better to leave first. The turning point came when David met Sarah. Sarah was different, not because she was perfect, but because she saw through his pattern and called him on it. When he started pulling away, she didn't chase him. When he started picking fights, she didn't fight back. When he started creating reasons to leave, she said something that stopped him cold. David, she said, I can see you're getting ready to run, and that's okay. You can run if you need to. But before you do, I want you to know that I see you. I see the part of you that's afraid. I see the part of you that wants to stay. I see the part of you that's tired of running. And I want you to know that if you decide to stay, if you decide to work through this instead of running from it, I'll be here. But if you decide to leave, don't make it about me. Don't make it about us. Own what it really is. You choosing fear over love. David left that night. He walked out of Sarah's apartment, convinced he was doing the right thing, protecting both of them from inevitable disaster. He told himself he was being mature, realistic, smart. He told himself that Sarah would understand, eventually, that she would thank him for not wasting her time. But something was different this time. Something about the way Sarah had seen him, really seen him, had cracked something open inside him. For the first time in his life, David couldn't pretend that leaving was about the other person. He couldn't pretend that he was the victim of someone else's behavior. He couldn't pretend that running was the brave choice. For 3 months, David lived with the weight of his choice. He threw himself into work, convinced himself he was happier alone, told his friends that the relationship just wasn't right. But late at night, when the distractions faded and he was alone with himself, David felt something he had never felt before, the full weight of his own pattern. He realized that he wasn't protecting himself from Sarah's rejection. He was protecting himself from his own capacity to love. He wasn't avoiding her abandonment. He was avoiding his own aliveness. He wasn't running from her inability to stay. He was running from his own ability to stay. The moment David realized this was the moment everything changed. It wasn't a dramatic realization. It wasn't a lightning bolt of awareness. It was a quiet recognition, like finally seeing something that had been in front of him all along. He realized that every time he ran, he wasn't escaping the pain of connection. He was creating it. 3 months later, David called Sarah, not to get back together, not to try again, but to thank her for showing him something about himself that no one had ever shown him before. To his surprise, Sarah was still there, not waiting for him, not hoping he would come back, but simply living her life with the same presence she had offered him. They talked for hours that night, not about getting back together, not about trying again, but about what it means to stay present with your own fear instead of running from it, about what it means to choose love not because it's safe, but because it's true, about what it means to stop protecting yourself from life and start participating in it. That conversation changed David's life, not because it led to a reunion, but because it led to a revolution in how he related to his own heart. For the first time in his life, David understood that the choice wasn't between safety and danger. The choice was between death and life, between contraction and expansion, between fear and love. But here's what David discovered, and what you need to know. This realization only comes when you stop running long enough to feel what you've been running from. And what you've been running from isn't other people's capacity to hurt you. What you've been running from is your own capacity to love. What are you avoiding that's avoiding you back? Right now in this moment, what relationship, what conversation, what commitment are you running from? What part of your life feels too real, too vulnerable, too alive for you to stay present with. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to tell you. Your external relationships are nothing more than a mirror of your internal relationship with yourself. The way you treat others is the way you treat your own heart. The way you abandon others is the way you abandon yourself. The way you protect yourself from others is the way you protect yourself from your own aliveness. When you run from someone who loves you, you're really running from the part of yourself that's capable of receiving love. When you create distance from someone who wants to know you, you're really creating distance from the part of yourself that wants to be known. When you convince yourself that someone is never coming back, you're really convincing yourself that you're not worth coming back to. And here's the spiritual law that governs all of this. What you resist persists. What you avoid controls you. What you run from follows you. You can change your location. You can change your relationship. You can change your entire life. But you cannot outrun your own pattern. They will show up in every relationship, every situation, every opportunity for connection until you finally turn around and face them. The person you're avoiding isn't the problem. The job you're avoiding isn't the problem. The conversation you're avoiding isn't the problem. The problem is that you've made avoidance your primary strategy for navigating life, and avoidance never leads to what you actually want. You want connection, but you avoid vulnerability. You want love, but you avoid intimacy. You want to matter, but you avoid commitment. You want to be seen, but you avoid being known. You want to belong, but you avoid staying anywhere long enough to build belonging. And all of this avoidance creates the very thing you're trying to avoid: rejection, abandonment, loneliness, the feeling that you don't matter, that you're not worth fighting for, that you're not worth staying with. Your nervous system, in its infinite wisdom, was designed for connection. Every cell in your body knows that isolation is death and connection is life. Your heart knows that love is not the enemy. Your soul knows that vulnerability is not weakness. But your mind, your brilliant protective mind, has convinced you that the opposite is true. Your nervous system goes into fight or flight, not when someone tries to hurt you, but when someone tries to love you. Your stress response activates not when someone is leaving, but when someone is staying. Your body treats intimacy like a threat, because somewhere along the way, intimacy became associated with danger. But your body can learn new associations. Your nervous system can be rewired. Your heart can remember that love is safe, that connection is natural, that vulnerability is your greatest strength, not your greatest weakness. The question is, are you willing to stay present with the discomfort of connection long enough to remember who you really are? Are you willing to stop running from your own aliveness? Are you willing to choose love even when every fiber of your being wants to choose safety? Because this is the moment of choice. This is the crossroad. This is where you decide whether you'll spend the rest of your life running from love or finally allowing yourself to receive it. This is where you decide whether you'll keep protecting yourself from life or finally start participating in. And the choice you make right now in this moment will determine everything that comes next. The choice to stay present instead of running. The choice to feel instead of numbing. The choice to connect instead of ice. This choice will either free you or imprison you for the rest of your life. The moment has come to stop running from your own heart and start listening to it. The moment has come to stop protecting yourself from love and start cultivating. The moment has come to transform the very patterns that have kept you safe but left you starving. But you also need to understand the seasons of growth. Just like a farmer doesn't expect his crops to grow at the same rate year round, you cannot expect your capacity for connection to develop at a steady pace. There will be seasons of rapid growth when everything feels possible and change feels effortless. There will be seasons of slow development when progress feels invisible and change feels impossible. There will be winters in your growth, times when everything feels dormant, when your old patterns seem stronger than your new choices, when you wonder if any of this is working. These are not signs of failure. These are necessary seasons of integration, times when the changes you've been making are taking root underground, preparing for the spring that will inevitably come. And there will be harvest moments when you suddenly realize that something fundamental has shifted. You'll find yourself staying present during a difficult conversation without even thinking about it. You'll notice that your first impulse is to connect rather than withdraw. You'll realize that love no longer feels like a threat but like a homecoming. Understanding these seasons prevents you from abandoning your growth during the difficult times. It helps you trust the process when progress feels slow. It reminds you that transformation is not a linear path, but a spiral, where you revisit the same challenges at deeper and deeper levels until you finally transcend them completely. But growth also requires you to understand the patterns that govern your relationships and your life. And here's a truth that will set you free. Life operates in predictable cycles, and once you understand these cycles, you gain tremendous power over your experiences. Opportunities for connection cycle through your life like seasons. Times when people enter your life who could become important. Times when existing relationships deepen or end. Times when you're called to greater intimacy or forced to establish clearer boundaries. Times when your heart is open and times when your heart feels closed. Most people experience these cycles unconsciously, reacting to them based on their fears and patterns rather than responding to them based on their wisdom and choice. But when you understand that these cycles are natural and predictable, you can prepare for them, work with them, and use them for your growth rather than being victimized by them. This cycle always begins with an invitation. Someone new enters your life, an existing relationship deepens. A conversation becomes possible that wasn't possible before. An opportunity for greater intimacy or commitment presents itself. This is the universe offering you a chance to practice something new, to choose differently than you've chosen before. How you respond to this invitation determines everything that follows. If you respond with openness, presence, and courage, the cycle becomes a spiral upward, an opportunity for growth and expansion. If you respond with fear, avoidance, and protection, the cycle becomes a repetition of your old patterns, an opportunity missed. When you understand this, you start to see these invitations everywhere. You start to recognize when life is offering you a chance to practice connection, to choose love, to stay present with difficulty. And instead of reacting unconsciously, you can respond consciously. But you also need to understand that not every invitation is meant to be accepted. Wisdom knows the difference between an opportunity for growth and an opportunity for harm. Discernment knows when to open and when to protect, when to engage and when to withdraw, when to stay and when to go. The difference is this: healthy boundaries come from a place of self-respect and clarity about what serves your highest good. Avoidance comes from a place of fear and an attempt to control outcomes. Healthy boundaries feel grounded and peaceful. Avoidance feels reactive and chaotic. You can learn to recognize the difference in your body. Healthy boundaries feel like strength. Avoidance feels like weakness, pretending to be strength. Healthy boundaries feel like choice. Avoidance feels like compulsion. Healthy boundaries feel like love. Avoidance feels like fear. When you feel yourself wanting to withdraw, ask yourself, is this wisdom or is this fear? Is this discernment or is this avoidance? Is this self-respect or is this self-protection? The answer will guide you toward the choice that serves your growth rather than your pattern. But recognizing these patterns requires you to develop awareness of your internal signals. Most people are so disconnected from their bodies, so caught up in their thoughts, so reactive to their emotions, that they miss the subtle cues that would guide them toward connection rather than disconnection. Your body knows when someone is safe and when they're not. Your heart knows when a relationship has potential and when it's already over. Your intuition knows when to stay and when to go, when to open and when to but you can only access this wisdom when you're present with yourself, when you're paying attention to the signals your system is constantly sending you. The early warning signs of avoidance are always physical first, emotional second, and mental last. Your body tenses before your heart closes. Your heart closes before your mind creates the story about why withdrawal is necessary. By the time you're thinking about leaving, you've already left energetically. Learning to recognize these early signals gives you the power to interrupt the pattern before it takes over. When you notice your shoulders tensing during a conversation, you can breathe and choose to stay present. When you notice your heart starting to close, you can make a conscious choice to remain open. When you notice your mind starting to generate reasons to leave, you can recognize this as the pattern rather than as truth. This kind of awareness takes practice. It requires you to slow down, to pay attention, to develop a relationship with your own internal experience. It requires you to stop being so focused on what's happening outside of you and start paying attention to what's happening inside of you. But once you develop this awareness, everything changes. You stop being reactive and start being responsive. You stop being controlled by your patterns and start making conscious choices. You stop running from your own aliveness and start cultivating it with intention and love. The cultivation of connection is not a destination you arrive at, it's a practice you commit to. It's a choice you make every day, sometimes every moment, to tend the garden of your heart with the same care and consistency that you would tend any garden that you wanted to flourish. And just like any garden, the results of your cultivation will be evident not just to you, but to everyone around you. People will feel the difference in your presence. They will sense the safety you've created within yourself. They will be drawn to the aliveness that you've stopped running from and started nurturing. This is how you stop being someone that others want to avoid and become someone that others want to stay close to. This is how you transform from someone who runs from love to someone who creates the conditions for love to flourish. This is how you stop protecting yourself from life and start participating in it fully. But before you can create those conditions for love to flourish, you must first confront the enemy within. And that enemy is not your fear, not your past, not your circumstance. The enemy is your own brilliant mind turned against you, creating sophisticated justifications for the very behaviors that destroy what you say you want most. You know exactly what I'm talking about. They're in your head that sounds so reasonable, so logical, so concerned for everyone's well-being. When it whispers, you're protecting them by pulling away. You're being realistic about human nature. You're saving yourself from inevitable disappointment. You're just being smart. This is not your friend. This is not your wisdom. This is your ego's desperate attempt to keep you small, safe, and alone. And it will use your intelligence, your past experiences, your legitimate insights about human behavior to convince you that running away is the mature thing to do. How many times have you convinced yourself that someone was better off without you? How many times have you decided that your needs were too much, your emotions too intense, your presence too complicated? How many times have you made the decision for someone else that they couldn't handle your full humanity? This is not protection. This is rejection. This is not wisdom. This is fear dressed up as spiritual insight. This is not love. This is abandonment disguised as sacrifice. When you tell yourself, I'm protecting them, what you're really saying is I'm protecting myself from the possibility that they might choose to leave. When you convince yourself that they're better off without me, what you're really saying is I'm not willing to risk being vulnerable enough to let them decide for themselves. And when you procrastinate on the difficult conversations, when you put off the commitment discussions, when you delay the repairs that relationships need, when you wait until it's too late to address the problems that could have been solved, you're not being considerate. You're being a coward. Yes, a coward. Not because fear makes you weak, but because you let fear make your choices for you while pretending that something noble is happening. The most destructive form of cowardice is the kind that masquerades as virtue, that turns self-sabotage into spiritual practice that makes abandonment look like love. You know what real protection looks like? It looks like staying present during difficult conversations instead of shutting down. It looks like communicating your needs clearly instead of expecting people to read your mind. It looks like showing up consistently instead of disappearing when things get real. You know what real love looks? It looks like letting people choose you with full information instead of making that choice for them. It looks like trusting people to handle your authentic self instead of deciding they can. It looks like believing people when they say they want to be close to you instead of convincing them they don't. The pattern of avoidance always follows the same sequence. And if you're honest, you can recognize it in your own life. First comes the intimacy, the connection, the moment when someone starts to matter. Then comes the fear, disguised as insight. Then comes the distancing, disguised as wisdom. Then comes the justification, disguised as love. And then comes the blame. Because when people finally get tired of chasing someone who's always running, when they finally stop trying to connect with someone who's always creating distance, when they finally give up on someone who's given up on the relationship long before, you get to point to their departure as proof that you were right all along. See, everyone leaves eventually. Good thing I didn't get too invested. Good thing I kept my guard up. Good thing I protected myself. But you didn't protect yourself from abandonment. You created it. You didn't avoid rejection. You manufactured it. You didn't prevent heartbreak. You guaranteed it. This is the difference between people who create lasting connections and people who live in perpetual loneliness. People who create lasting connections take responsibility for their part in every relationship failure. They ask themselves, how did my fear contribute to this outcome? What did I do or not do that helped create this result? How can I choose differently next time? People who live in perpetual loneliness always find a way to make it someone else's fault. They focus on what the other person did wrong, how the other person changed, why the other person couldn't handle the relation. They never ask the question that would actually help them. How did I participate in creating the very thing I was trying to avoid? The success mentality in relationships sounds like this. Every connection teaches me something about love. Every challenge is an opportunity to grow. Every conflict is a chance to choose understanding over being right. Every difficulty is a test of my commitment to connection over my attachment to comfort. The mediocrity mentality sounds like this. People always disappoint you. Relationships are too much work. It's easier to be alone. Everyone has too much baggage. Nobody knows how to communicate anymore. The right person will just understand me without me having to explain myself, which is running your relationships, which mentality is guiding your choices. Which story are you telling yourself about why your connections keep ending the same way? Because here's what you need to understand. You cannot create extraordinary relationships with ordinary commitment. You cannot build lasting connections with casual effort. You cannot generate deep intimacy with surface level vulnerability. You cannot receive unconditional love while offering conditional presence. The daily disciplines that create extraordinary connections are not complicated, but they require something most people are unwilling to give. Consistency in the face of discomfort, commitment in the face of uncertainty, vulnerability in the face of potential rejection. Every morning, before your feet hit the floor, before you check your messages, before you start thinking about your day, set an intention for connection, not a goal, not a plan, not an expectation, an intention. Today I choose presence over protection. Today I choose connection over comfort. Today I choose love over fear. This isn't positive thinking. This is programming your consciousness for different choices. This is training your awareness to notice opportunities for connection that you would normally miss. This is preparing your heart to stay open when your historical pattern would be to close. Then throughout your day, look for micro opportunities to practice connection. Text someone just to appreciate them, not because you need something. Call someone just to hear that, not because you have news to share. Show up somewhere fully present, instead of distracted by your phone or your thoughts. Have one real conversation every day, not small talk, not logistics, not surface pleasantries. One conversation where you share something true about your internal experience, where you ask someone else something you genuinely want to know, where you create a moment of actual human connection. Stay present during one uncomfortable moment every day, instead of escaping into distraction, deflection, or distance. When someone is upset, stay present with their emotion instead of trying to fix it or avoid it. When you feel triggered, stay present with your own reaction instead of numbing it or projecting it onto others. Make one commitment and keep it, no matter how small. Call when you say you'll call. Show up when you say you'll show up. Follow through on what you promise, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. Your capacity for connection is built through small acts of reliability that compound over time into unshakable trust. Every week, have one conversation that repairs or deepens a relationship. Apologize for something you did wrong. Appreciate someone for something they did right. Address a problem that's been creating distance. Express a need that hasn't been met. Create intimacy through honesty instead of avoiding conflict through silence. Every month, take inventory of your relationships, not to judge them, but to tend them. Which connections are thriving and how can you support that growth? Which connections are struggling and what is your part in that struggle? Which connections have ended and what lessons can you extract from their completion? Every quarter, make one commitment that scares you. Plan something with someone that requires you to trust they'll show up. Share something with someone that requires you to trust they can handle it. Ask for something from someone that requires you to trust they might say yes. And every year recommit to growth over comfort, connection over safety, love over fear. Because the moment you decide you've grown enough, learned enough, healed enough, you begin the slow slide back into the patterns that kept you isolated in the first place. But what happens when you've done all of this work, when you've made all of these changes, when you've chosen vulnerability and presence and connection, and someone still decides they're never coming back? This is the point of no return. The moment when all of your growth gets tested by the very outcome you've always feared most. This is when you find out whether you've truly transformed or whether you've just learned to perform transformation while keeping the same core beliefs about yourself and love. When someone decides they're never coming back, you have two choices. You can use their decision as evidence that your old beliefs were right all along, that vulnerability is dangerous, that connection is impossible, that you should have kept your guard up. This choice returns you to exactly where you started, only now with fresh proof that your fears were justified. Or you can recognize their decision as having nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their capacity, their choices, their journey. You can use their departure not as evidence that love is impossible, but as evidence that you are now strong enough to love without needing to control the outcome. The spiritual truth that will set you free is this: someone else's inability or unwillingness to stay connected with you says nothing about your lovability and everything about their availability. Their departure is not a reflection of your value, it's a reflection of their capacity. When you truly understand this, their choice to leave becomes not a rejection of who you are, but a revelation of who they are. Not a statement about love's impossibility, but a statement about their readiness for love. Not proof that you should close your heart, but evidence that your heart is now strong enough to remain open even when others cannot meet you there. This doesn't mean you chase people who have clearly indicated they don't want to be pursued. This doesn't mean you keep trying to connect with people who have chosen disconnection. This means you honor their choice while refusing to let their choice define your worth or determine your future capacity for connection. The point of no return is not about them never coming back. The point of no return is about you never going back to the version of yourself that believed love was the enemy, that connection was dangerous, that vulnerability was weakness. Right now, today, this moment, you have the power to interrupt every pattern that has kept you isolated, every belief that has kept you protected, every story that has kept you small. But this power only exists in action, not in understanding. It only exists in practice, not in theory. It only exists in choice, not in intention. Here is what you do starting today. Text someone you've been avoiding and tell them you've been thinking about them. Make one phone call you've been putting off. Have one conversation you've been dreading. Show up to one gathering you would normally skip. Stay present during one difficult moment you would normally escape. This week, apologize to one person you've hurt through your avoidance. Express appreciation to one person whose love you've taken for granted. Ask for support from one person you've been trying to impress with your independence. Make one plan that requires you to trust someone else's commitment. This month, commit to one relationship that scares you with its potential. Start one project that requires collaboration. Join one community that asks you to show up consistently. Choose one person to be completely honest with about your fears around connection. Take the 30-day challenge. Every single day for the next 30 days. Do one thing that chooses connection over protection, vulnerability over safety, love over fear. Watch how your nervous system recalibrates. Watch how your relationships transform. Watch how your entire life reorganizes around your new commitment to connection. The person you've been is not the person you have to remain. The patterns that have controlled your relationships are not permanent laws of your existence. The fear that has kept you isolated is not stronger than the love that wants to flow through you. Connection is not a luxury you can afford when you feel safe enough. Connection is your birthright, your purpose, your path home to yourself. The choice is yours. The moment is now. And if you're willing to trade the prison of protection for the freedom of authentic connection, everything changes starting today. Your heart is not broken. It has never been broken. It has only been closed, and what has been closed can be opened. What has been protected can be shared. What has been hidden can be revealed. The love you've been running from is the love you've been searching for all along.